ma'am. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Very good morning to one and all present here. Myself, Laha, Assistant Professor, going to be a moderator for the session. We are stepping into the second day of Faculty Development Program on Emerging Trends in Legal Education. It's the right time to know about the importance of the law faculty members. Faculties are the pillars of the society to mend and develop the younger generation to become the future leaders of the society. Now, I request our captain of the ship, beloved principal, ma'am, Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh, to deliver the welcome address. Ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Eha. Good morning to one and all present here for the first session of today's FDP program. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming our resource person for today, Professor Dr. Sangita Laha, Dean of Faculty, National University of Study and Research in Law, Ranchi. I extend my heartfelt thanks to you, ma'am, for accepting our invite and gracing the occasion with your valuable lecture. Respected madam will be taking a session on gender equality and women empowerment, a ground reality, which has always been a topic, which is a trending topic from time immemorial. Now, dear participants, I kindly request you all to put your heart and soul into the lecture and call out the benefits from it to enhance your teaching abilities. Thank you once again, and over to you, Ehaini.
Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of the Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam, I welcome the dynamic keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Sangita Laha, Associate Professor and Dean of Faculty. Now, she graduated her MA in Political Science and MBA in Marketing from Patna University. After obtaining LLB, she have done LLM in Hindu Law from Patna University. Further, she have done her PhD on the topic of law and gender justice from University of Calcutta. Currently pursuing postdoctoral program on the topic of democratic decentralization and women's participation, a critical study with reference to Panchayat Raj system in India from Chanakya National Law University, Patna. She's been assistant professor in West Bengal National Juridical Sciences, Kolkata, Chanakya National Law University, Patna, and also been as a professor in Amity Law School, Amity University, Lucknow. Currently, as associate professor in law and dean of faculty since 2018, and as a deputy director, where she is a PhD scholars. Further, she has presented and published several research papers and articles in journals of national and international levels. To cite a few, she has published a book titled Women and Legal Profession in reference to Indian context. Then, Judicial Activism in Patent Laws in India, Analysis of Cases Regarding Evergreening of Patents. And Substance Use and Abuse in India, a comparative study with other countries. She has been invited as a speaker in several programs and has participated in the discussion of formation of syllabus on protection of child rights organized by the Commission of Protection of Child Rights, Uttar Pradesh and UNICEF at RMNLU, Lucknow. She delivered a lecture on women's right to property pre and post 2005 organized by Unity Law and Degree College, Lucknow. She recently was invited as a panelist and spoke on sexual harassment in workforce in the 8th National Conference for Women in Police organized by IPS officers in Ranchi. She was also invited as a resource person on women's studies and gender sensitization in the refresher course by UGC MHRD Ranchi University. By this brief profile info, I welcome Dr. Sangita Laha to talk about the topic of gender equality and women empowerment, a ground reality. Forum is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you, Principal Ma'am, for inviting me. It is a great honor for me to present some of my views, which is very close to my heart, gender and women equality, a ground reality, because I will be bringing forth some of the changes that we have been experiencing after independence, even prior and post. So I have divided my lecture into two parts. One is a little bit of view pre-independence and little bit of view post-independence. I cannot charter into much areas, but I've selected 2-3 areas where we can discuss a little about gender and women empowerment. Now, women empowerment is not a new word. I mean, though it sounds a new buzzword across the globe in the last 4 decades, but we are quite now accustomed to this word as empowerment. Actually, women empowerment can be, it can be divided into 5 components. One of the components are a woman thinks that she's self-worth. So, in a way, empowerment is that she has been she's been attaining a sort of a self-dignity, whether in the family or in the working place or in the society. So somehow she's empowered. Second, she has the power of controlling her own lives. It is not that she's controlled by others, because women in our society is somewhat said to be prior to marriage under the control of her father, after marriage the control of her husband, and when she becomes a mother, the control of the son. So empowerment in a way gives the right to control her own lives from within and outside home. And lastly, there is the ability to influence and direct a social change. Why social change? To create a better social and economic order, both nationally and internationally and universally. So so women empowerment, in a way, the subtle language, we are talking about gender equality. And why we're talking of gender equality? Because it is enshrined in the Indian Constitution, in the preamble, in the fundamental rights, fundamental duties, and directive principles, state policy, and most of you are aware of it. The Constitution not only grants equality to women, but also empowers the state to adopt measures for positive discrimination in favor of women. And how the state? By Article 15, subclause 3 of the Constitution of India. So empowerment of women means developing more and more of an individual in many ways. 1, to be politically empowered. 2, to be socially empowered. And 3, to be economically empowered. Government has also taken various initiatives for empowerment by analyzing the position of women by Gender Inequality Index, Global Gap Index of United Nations. So, women.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can I share the PPT screen, ma'am?
PPT, I am not being able to share the PPT because I'm speaking through Android phone, ma'am. I'm not using the laptop today.
Ma'am, we will, ma'am. We will do, ma'am. Yes.
I think I sent slides yesterday.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Please.
Yes, ma'am.
Should I continue?
Yes, ma'am. You can continue, ma'am.
See, please do not think so much of the slides, because if somebody is hearing my lecture, he or she will understand. So I'm not much into slides. I do not believe much in slides and more on the communication part. So anyhow, so why we need empowerment? We need empowerment because in a way we are trying to achieve what is enshrined in the Constitution of India by way of the equality, where both men and women have equal power and opportunities in matters of education, healthcare, economic participation, personal development, etc. This empowers, and it also empowers the state to have to make more laws, more legislation for women and for that of the children. So empowerment can be described as a process which helps to people to assert their control over the factors which affect their lives. And it is a means of developing them of being more aware individually, or to be more politically active, economically more productive, to be more independent, so that one is able to make intelligent discussions in matters that affect them. Now, what are the indicators of women empowerment? As per the Beijing Conference of 1995, it has identified certain qualitative and quantitative indicators of women empowerment. And these indicators are, number one, increase of self-esteem. So one has to, increase the self-confidence of an individual, not only individually, but collectively as a woman. Two, increase in articulation, knowledge, awareness, health, nutrition, reproductive rights, law and literacy. Three, increase in personal leisure time and childcare. Fourth, increase on decrease of workload in new programs. And then fifth, change in roles and responsibility in family and community. Sixth, visible increase on decrease in violence on women and rights. Seventh, responses to changes in social customs like child marriage, dowry, discrimination against widows. So, all these changes, how the woman is responding, whether it's a positive response or there's an obstruction. Eighth, visible changes in women's participation for attending meetings, participating, and also demanding for participation. Ninth, increase in bargaining and negotiating power at home, in community, and the collective increase access to ability to gather information. 11, formation of women collective. 12, some positive changes in social attitudes. 13, awareness and recognition of women's economic contribution within and outside the household. And 14, women's decision making over her work. So these are some of the qualitative indicators. Now, what are the quantitative indicators of empowerment? First, demographic trends. And what demographic trends? The trends in fertility, sex ratio, expectancy of birth, average age. This is how, one goes with the indicator of how women is empowerment. I mean, it is more based on the empirical study. 2B, number of women participating in different development programs. 3, gender access and control over community resources, government schemes like creche, non-formal education, cooperative societies, etc. 4th, the change in physical health and nutritional level of the woman. E, in literacy and enrollment levels. Participation of level in women's political process. And so these are some of the indicators which are quantitative indicators. That is how you measure the women empowerment. So now we move on to the now we move on to what is the objective of women empowerment? Why women needs to be empowered? That's the whole moot or crux of the problem. We always talk about women empowerment. Now that we have understood what is women empowerment and why women empowerment, so actually what is the objective? Why women needs to be empowered? Number one, to create a national network of public, private, NGO centers for delivering reproductive and health services to any woman in need. 2, to develop health management. Now, currently, we have been undergoing 2 lockdowns. First phase of pandemic, the second phase of pandemic, where women's mental health and physical health has been affected. So, in order to develop a proper health management, a health package at all levels, that's why women need to be empowered. To improve the accessibility, the quality of maternal and child health care services. 4, to identify how women's empowerment affects in the important development outcomes, such as in health, in child, such as in health, education, fertility behavior, income level. See, we also, for example, we have something known as surrogacy in India. And trust me, it is a boon. If you visit Anand, that place of Gujarat, women are letting their wombs because they want to mint money. And one of the reasons are such women come from the income group. So they are tempted to get more money, and in the process of getting more money through surrogacy, they are also exploited. Their health gets affected. They are emotionally at times, they want to be detached with the child, but because she's a surrogate mother, who knows whether she's emotionally involved or not. So do we have a proper surrogacy law in India? I'm afraid I'm not. So one of the objectives of women empowerment is to know also her rights, to support in community packages for women, to improve and increase clinical services, to organize educational empowerment programs for girls. These are some of the basic objectives we have identified for women empowerment. So India is concerned, it has very much been unequal so far, women and men when we're concerned. For example, India is one of the countries where property rights of Indian women were equal for several decades. Why I say several decades? Because India has got diverse religions, and every religious community are to be governed by their respective personal laws. And each community have got their own groups, own local customs that govern also their property rights. For example, in a state where I'm right now based, in the state of Jharkhand, we find that tribals dominate the population here. But do tribal women are empowered through their succession rights? Do they have land rights? So tribal women, even among the tribal community, there are various religions, and each tribal of each state continue to be governed by their property rights, by customs and norms of their tribes based on their customary laws. So among India only, among the different sects, we have different property rights. And the women did not get property rights right as we have been achieving now. So there has been a gender discrimination, and because there has been a gender discrimination, in 1950, when we had the living organ, that constitution, where Article 14 and 16 talks of equality, obviously it was very obvious that equality, not only in paper and document, but also in spirit, had to be achieved. So what happened at that point of time, just after independence, and when this constitution came into India, we find a series of, women-friendly laws coming into being. We have the Hindu Succession Act that gave the right of ownership to women by virtue of Section 14 of the Hindu Succession Act. It also gave a different class of heirs to the women by virtue of Section 15. Then we have the adoption laws, where a single woman, widow, and also a divorcee could adopt a child. Earlier, that was not so. Prior to the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act of 1956. Then we had the guardianship law also, which gave the mother also a right to be the guardian of the child. And we have the famous Geeta Hariharan case. If you read it, you will know why I'm bringing this guardianship laws also. Then we have the famous Hindu Marriage Act, where at least monogamy was established. So earlier we had polygamy. Men could have innumerable wives, but so far women were concerned, they were limited to only one. And if she was a widow at a very young age, she didn't have the liberty to remarry until and unless Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar brought the widow remarriage act. So what we, in every stage prior to independence, even before independence, much before, when we were struggling for freedom, we find that there has been a gender discrimination. Right to vote was only achieved in the 1930s for women. So what I'm trying to say was there was no just equal property right of Indian women. And the journey for Indian women for property right for the first time came in 1937 when the Karnataka Hindu Law Women's Right of 1933 gave women limited right to the property. And what this limited right is, this was called a woman's estate or limited estate, wherein the woman had the right to live, to enjoy, but she did not have the right to partition that property. She did not have the right to sell that property. She did not have the right to mortgage the property. It was only by way of that if she is a widow, then she can be maintained from that property. So it gave her a limited right. It never gave her the ownership right. And the 1937 Act for the first time brought three classes of women as heirs. That is the deceased widow, the deceased son's widow, and the deceased son's widow. So three classes. The deceased widow is the Karta's widow, then the son's widow, and then the son's grandson's widow. But they also had a limited estate in the property. And so we had two sets of definition, and all of you law students who are present here must be knowing. One was that of women's property, wherein she gets a limited estate, and the second was Sridhan. And in the concept of Sridhan, which constituted women's property. Sri means woman and dhan is property, which constituted a woman's property. These properties were where she received by way of gift before the marriage, after the marriage, at the time of childbirth. So these were exclusively her Sridhan property, where she exclusively enjoyed her own right. So what we find here is discrimination was not only in society, she was not only looked down, but discrimination was, the law was also very stingy in giving her equality. For example, the starting of the journey for where women can at least have some right, some space to breathe in if she becomes a widow, then it was by way of the 1937 Act. Then it took again a long years from 1937 to 1956, long journey again to give women the ownership right by virtue of Section 14 of the Hindu Succession Act. But again, the law was also stingy. Now, why I say the law was stingy? Because although women, some part of India, for example, women of Bengal or some part of Assam, enjoyed the ownership right, the mother, the wife and the daughter, that is the widow and the daughter, had a right in the deceased property, but women of the Mitakshara school of law did not enjoy the ownership right. So again, here we find two divisions. And in 1956, the parliamentaries were so stingy and they were so fearful that if they give women the ownership right, they may, get more criticism from the society, which was still orthodox and was not ready to, bring women at par with men in matters of property rights. I'm just giving you just 2-3 examples. As a lecture, I can't go into, in different areas, but in the areas which affects in day-to-day life. And I thought I must discuss the succession here because it revisits our mind to have equality in matters of ownership. And if woman, as I said, is economically empowered, it means she is empowered in reality. So I'm talking of the practical aspects. And from 1956 onwards, it's only in 2005 by the amendment in the Hindu Succession Act that for the first time, daughters were made co-partners in the property of her father, and she could have the right of what we say, the right of ownership as that of her brother or that of the son. And then the law started changing. So 1956 to 2005, again, a long journey for that class of women who belong to the Mitakshara school of law. So see how society was so orthodox, was not ready to give the chunk, the pie of that cake, which actually belonged to the woman. And she had to harp her. It is her property. And why should she ask for it? Like the son, For the first time in 2005, daughters were treated equal with that of the women. And lately, we had in 2020 that Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma's case. I request all of you to read that case again and again, because for the first time, it said that even if the father is not alive, at the time in 2005, when daughters were given for the first time the right to have in father's property, even if the father is not alive, then too his property can will go to the daughter the moment she takes birth. So it doesn't mean that post 2005 both the father and the daughter has to be alive. If that is how the ruling of the Supreme Court was. Different, different rulings came up before. Some said, no, the father has to be alive. So there were, conflicting judgments of different high courts, which got settled in the Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma's case. So now, in the meantime, why these succession laws or these laws started coming in? Why POSCO started coming in? Why sexual harassment, prevention of sexual harassment in workplace started coming in? Why so much of these, the famous cases which was delivered by the Supreme Court, and again the legislation started coming in. Why there were changes in the Maternity Benefit Act, and so many changes have come in. Why it was so? The reason was that India is already a member of the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discriminations Against Women, shortly known as CEDAW, in 1993, and which talked about the status of women. And it recognized that the central issue in determining the status of women was India had to ratify. India ratified the various international conventions on human rights instruments. One was, of course, this CEDAW. So accordingly, in 1993, we have the National Commission for Women that was set up by the Act of the Parliament in 1990 to look into the status of women. So because India is one of the signatories, being a signatory, this National Commission for Women in 1990 was set up. And it talked about the safeguards and rights of the legal entitlement for women. Then we have the Cairo Conference in 1994, which was organized by the United Nations on Population and Development, and that called for attention of women empowerment as a central focus. And UNDP developed the Gender Empowerment Measure, that is GFM, which focused on the key variables that reflect women's participation in society. One of the variables was political power or decision-making process. So this happened in 1995. And all of you know, in 1993-94, we have the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, which brought a lot of changes and made reservation for women of which class? Women belonging to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, the members in the Panchayati Raj, in the urban governance as well as in local governance. In urban governance, we have the 1994 amendment, and so far local governance, that is popularly known as Panchayati Raj, we have the 93rd amendment, which again brought reservation for women belonging to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So I'm not going into much of the legislation part, because if you read it, you will know what the change that brought into. Then we come to the women empowerment policy of 2001. Now, what was the goal and objective? The goal of the policy was to bring about the advancement, development, and empowerment of women. The policy was widely disseminated so as to encourage active participation of all stakeholders for achieving its goal. And the objective of the policy was to create an environment through positive economic and social policies for full development of women so that they realize their potential Two, the de jure and de facto enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedom by women on equal basis with men in spheres of political, economic, and social and cultural. So time to time, government is bringing up the policy, and I'm talking of the 2001 policy. Third, equal access in participation and decision making, women in social, political, and economic life. Fourth, access to participation, access to women in healthcare. So these were some of the basic fundas, basic points that was formulated in the 2001 policy. Other than that, initiative was also taken for vulnerable and marginalized group of women in different circumstances. One, for schemes for national scheduled tribe finance and development corporation. Two, integrated child development scheme. Three, national rural health mission. Fourth, Janani Suraksha Yojana, integrated child protection scheme. Swadhar, a scheme for women in different circumstances. Targeted public distribution system, which is known as TPDS. Anantyodaya Anna Yojana, Ujwala, a scheme of prevention for trafficking and rehabilitation and reintegration of women who are being trafficked. Then Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, RSBY. Then Indira Gandhi Mahila Sahyog Yojana, which was for the maternity benefit schemes. Then Rajiv Gandhi scheme for empowerment of adolescent girls. Swam Siddha scheme for working women. Hostels, support of training of employment program, Indira Awas Yojana, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Development Guarantee Act, which is known as famously nowadays talked about Manreka. So these were some of the programs apart from policy that came out at that point of time. But what we find is that apart from these policies, there was an introduction in 1995 for gender-related development index. Now, this is the measurement whether how much the status of women they have achieved socially, politically, economically, health-wise, etc. So gender employment measure, GEF, coincided with the international recognition of importance of monitoring the progress of gender gaps, in matters of employment, in different professions. For example, although in low echelons of judiciary, women have entered in the judicial service lately, if we find in the last 10 years, the index that shows. But as you move towards the High Court, District Court, as DJs, District Judge, High Courts, and Supreme Court, you will find very less women. Just 1%, right now it is 4% of the total, strength, judges' strength, taking of all the high courts and Supreme Courts of India. So there is a gender gap in our profession also. If you take our profession, if you take academia, you will find there are very few women who have attained the recognition of vice chancellors. Those women who have attained as vice chancellors, they are in women universities, or maybe one or two who could pave the way as vice chancellors, directors, or deans of the department or that of university. So the Gender Inequality Index introduced an experimental measure to remedy the shortcomings of the previous indicator, and which was introduced in 1995 by the Human Development Report. The United Nations Development Program of Human Development Report 2030, India stood, it's very saddening to say to me in this lecture, India stood at 132nd position out of 187 countries on the Gender Inequality Index, performing worse than Pakistan, whose position is, at least it has improved than India, it is 123. All nations in South Asia except Afghanistan performed. There are Tamil Nadu is an exception, even for women in state assemblies or parliament. I'll come to that. with an exception of Tamil Nadu. So that Tamil Nadu is just not India. But if you take India as a whole, if you go to Meghalaya, if you go to Nagaland, if you go to many of the Northeast states, you won't find women in those areas. Even in Sikkim also, which is again not a very old state like Tamil Nadu or West Bengal. So please don't compare Tamil Nadu. I'll come to that, but allow me to finish. All nations except South Asia, except Afghanistan, except Afghanistan, which with Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka is still in 75th position. Bangladesh is 111th position. Nepal is 102 position. But India is in the position of 123. So this is the UNDP program, the report of 2013. So it's not much late, just 7 years back, 7 to 8 years back report, which does not give a very good picture of achieving gender parity in in different levels. Now, so far political empowerment arena is concerned, India has scored quite strong. Why? Because India had women prime minister, India had women president. So to the world, at least India could portray that in the highest level of political share, we did had women. But the political sub-index measures the gender gap between men and women, also in the political decision-making hierarchy in terms of ratio of women to men to minister level positions and in the parliament. Now, again, so a little bit deeper onto the political participation of women in India. At the grassroots level, yes, we have 50% of reservation. Bihar, the state of Bihar, the state of UP has given 50% reservation in the local self-governance institution. And this has made improved political participation of women in India. Yet, political participation of women in legislative assemblies and parliament is still quite low in India. Women have adorned the position of president, prime minister, no doubt, speakers, leader of the opposition party. And they have proved also their worth. But percentage of women in decision-making has always remained low. Women do not share the power of decision-making because currently, if you see, even in the last election, with the central government, the government that is in the center, we have only 3 union cabinet ministers. So there is a gap between the formal idea of women participation and their meaningful use of power. And to roll back in the initial days of independence, in the first formed Lok Sabha in 1952-51, there were only 22 women members of parliament, which meant 1.4%. Why 1.4% of the total existing population at that point of time? The number also did not change in the next Lok Sabha election in 1957. And according to the data available in the Lok Sabha website, in the third Lok Sabha election, that is in 1962 to 67, women representation increased to 37. Again, there was a decrease in the number in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Lok Sabha, which stood as 33, 28, and 21 respectively. So the curve had gone down. In 1997, in the 6th Lok Sabha, witnessed the smallest proportion of women in parliament as mere as 3.5%. The number again increased to 32 women in the 7th Lok Sabha in the 80-84. And in 80-84-89, we had 45 women members being elected. So what I'm trying to say, there was a gradual increase. In the 16th, that is the outgoing Lok Sabha, had 66 female MPs, 2 more than previous term, and with over 14%, that is with 78 MPs, members of the parliament, the current Lok Sabha has the highest number of women MPs since 1952. So, the curve has been going down. But let's examine the reality through statistics. Has the situation changed? Yes, it has changed, but it has changed only marginally since 1952. And my statistics will, whatever I have done research, will say so. By saying it, the women share in population remained 48.5%. And the share of women MPs are 8% points to 12.6% between the first 1952 and the 16th Lok Sabha election in 2015. There was just one woman MP for about 8 million Indian women in 1952. And by 2015, there were about more than 9 million women. But in national parliament, it increased by 1%, that is 24.3%. So, yes, women as voters, women participating in the electoral process has increased. Rather, in the last election, if you see the index, it has increased slightly more than the men. But have proportionately women representation in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, in the parliament? Now, the highest, as of 5th June 2021, the total number of women MPs in the Rajya Sabha is 27. And the total number of 232 members, which comes around 11%. While in Lok Sabha, we have 79 women members out of the total 543 members. And this brings the tally of women in parliament to 106. These figures are substantially lower compared to the global average of 22.9% and the Asian average of 16.3% of women representative in the upper houses. Even if we see women, how many women have held as cabinet ministers? 2 were ministers of state with independent charge, and the rest 18 women were ministers of state in different ministries. In the Lok Sabha, 16th Lok Sabha, that is in between 2014 and 19, there were 3 new women ministers who were given the cabinet rank, and in the 17th Lok Sabha, had the highest representation of women at 14.3%, but the ruling government included only 6 women ministers, of which 3 are only in the cabinet rank, highlighting how women are underrepresented in the decision-making process. If you see the stats of 30th March 2021, there are 6 states which have no women ministers, including Nagaland, Sikkim, and Manipur. And no state comes close to a third of female ministers. The highest proportion of female ministers are in Tamil Nadu with 13%, and 68% of states have less than 10% female representation in the state leadership. So what is this debate about? Again, we come to that old debate. That is, it is old debate in a new bottle, old wine in a new bottle, which again says inadequacy of women in the elected representative. Therefore, it is imperative not only for the government, but also for us to think that whether we should have legislative or constitutional reforms to ensure women in fair access in political, especially in the Lok Sabha, especially in the decision-making process. Women should be more in the judiciary. Women should be more in the bureaucrats. Women should be more in pilots. And lately, of course, there has been, the biases have gone. At least women are now being inducted in army. So, therefore, empowerment here, therefore, we do see that women have been empowered. There has been some equal minuses. The roles they have acted out in the roles that have challenged the male dominance in politics, in bureaucracy, in judiciary, in army. These were some challenging roles that women have taken up. They have fared considerably well, but so far the national law universities as concerned, we have 50% of girls and 50% of boys. In fact, in some batches, girls are more than the boys. But do we have equal representation of women in the judiciary? Do we have women as corporate leaders? Do we have women as partners in law firms? I'm afraid it is not. Even though legal education is entering into the mainstream, women have entered into the legal profession. Women like Indra Jai Singh have made a lot of impact in bringing so much of change in the society, but considerably we haven't found women that way, in the higher echelons. So empowerment here of women defines the values, the beliefs that they derive through the sense from male authorities. Then this process of this parameter of women empowerment has therefore been given 5 dimensions: cognitive, psychological, economic, political, and physical. The cognitive dimension refers to women having an understanding of the conditions. So if women are in family courts, women are in judiciary, it is quite natural that they will depart their judgment through their lenses. It can be more holistic. The judgment can be more holistic in nature. It can have a fair balance. If there's a division bench of a woman judge and that of one male judge, then there can be a balance of judgment. So it's a cognitive dimensions that refers to women having an understanding of the conditions, the causes why women have been subjugated at the micro, micro and macro level. And it involves choices that may go against cultural expectations and norms. 2, the psychological dimension includes the belief that women can act as personal and societal level to improve their individual rights and the society in which they live. 3rd, the economic component, if they are economically empowered, economic component requires that women have access and control over the finances. Right now we have a woman finance minister, and though she may have met with a lot of criticism, but it is quite natural that she has accepted a challenging role, and it thus ensures some degree of financial autonomy. If woman is empowered, if she has got property, if she has got a job, if she has a stable income, it means she has financial independence, financial autonomy. So it is a change of the economic balance of power, which naturally alters the fixed traditional gender role that women had before. What is the political empowerment? The political element entails a woman to have the capability to analyze, organize, and mobilize for social change. In the state of Uttar Pradesh, there has been a lot of women who have entered entered in the grassroots politics. Many of them have become sarpanch, mukhias. In Bihar also, many women have become sarpanch and mukhias. So, they are able to mobilize to bring some sort of change at the village level. Then there is a physical element of gaining control over one's body, and that is through the ability to protect oneself from sexual violence to the empowerment process. A lot of crimes have taken place against women in the society. So if she is empowered, if she is physically empowered, she is given that training, it is quite natural she will be able to defend herself. So the parameters here, once again, to conclude, before the conclusion, is the parameters of women empowerment are not only to raise self-esteem, but the elimination of discriminations against women participation should be seen in areas of access to food, equal wages, the gender gap between men and women, property rights, I've discussed that, family resources, freedom of movement to travel, the famous Maneka Gandhi case, access to credit, control over her savings, earnings, resources, guardianship and custody rights of children and maintenance for herself. Also, other objective is gender sensitization, and this can be achieved in training of schools, colleges, in other professional institutes like us for bringing about institutional changes. And how institutional changes we can do in law colleges or in law universities is through a legal aid program. We may take up a village as a sample, as a study, and slowly we can motivate our students to go to the village and make aware of the rights through skits, through dramas, because that is how the villages in many parts of India would understand. All the villages in all the states are not so advanced or so that is how university can also foster, can outreach the society by bringing a change, thereby the thoughts that has been enshrined in the constitution, in the preamble of India, to achieve socialism, to achieve equality of law, equal protection of law, to make the state think once again, to bring much of societal and legal changes. I think that is all for today. I still have 5 minutes to go. Should I go?
Yes, ma'am, you can, please. Yes, ma'am, you can.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for the enlightened speech regarding the levels and the objects of women empowerment. With your permission, ma'am, may I move on to the question and answer session?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I have a meeting at around 1:45, man. So if you could just briefly come out for 2-3 interactive session, I think that would be fine.
Due to the time constraint. The first question is from Dr. Nazima, Assistant Professor. Do we think the law itself fails when acceptance from society cannot be ensured? Question is in the context of the recent judgment.
Can you go a bit slow so that I understand the question? A little slow, ma'am.
Do you think the law itself fails when acceptance from society cannot be ensured? The question is in the context of the recent judgment of Supreme Court awarded equal co-parental right for daughters after 15 years of amendment in Hindu Succession Act in 2005.
I'm afraid this is a negativity because the society has accepted daughters equal to that of the son. And if the society wants to progress, this judgment is just a one step ahead, just a one step in a way to accept and to say that daughters have right in their parental property, in the co-parental property. So it is not that society is not accepting. Society has to change.
Yes.
And therefore, if the Supreme Court doesn't take the lead, who will take the lead in India or in any matter of any country? The apex court has to take the lead. And through its judicial activism, Supreme Court has once again proved that gender parity has to be there in succession laws also.
Thank you, ma'am. The other question, ma'am, is from Dr. V. Shamsundar, Assistant Professor. The question is whether 33% or 50% reservation for women will create women empowerment in India, or is there any other measures to achieve women empowerment in India, ma'am?
See, this was the government policy, and this policy is actually based on, it is a flow from the 73rd and 74th Amendment, which talked about reservation of women in the seats of panchayat and in municipal corporations. But yes, 33% and 55% has brought gender to a larger extent into the grassroots politics. Initially, women were in Parda system. So that at least that, that ceiling has broken. So women are now coming forward to enter into the politics. But unfortunately, it is those women who have a political background, whose in-laws are in politics or whose parents are in politics, they have gone into the lower echelons, lower grassroots level, or women who are of the higher caste, where Brahmins and, that high caste of community is dominating that village, is women of that upper caste is actually going into politics because they want power also. But much objective has also not been achieved, although, that glass ceiling has broken. But many, if you go to the ground reality of states of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, these women in grassroots level who are sarpanch or mukhias, who are head of that panchayat, of that block, gram sabha, of that panchayat, she's more said to be a proxy of her husband. So husband plays a major role in the decision-making process, or if the father-in-law is one of the member of that, village community, he has more hold in the decision-making process. So, but 50% and 33% was required to bring women in at least in the lower echelons of politics.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for that deep explanation. Now, this phone session to be an end. So I would like to thank you, ma'am. If you have to put someone on the pedestal, put teachers. They are a society heroes. With the sayings of Guy Kawasaki, absolutely it suits to our resource person today. On behalf of the Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam, I thank our resource person for our wonderful and fruitful session in the busiest schedule, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your speech.
Thank you, and God.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you. Wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Dear participants, the feedback form has been posted in the chat box. Kindly update it. For the afternoon session, the Zoom link and the schedule will be posted in the Telegram group. After filling the feedback form, kindly leave the session.
Sham, afternoon session 1:45, Appa.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. 1:45, ma'am.
Sure, okay.
1:45 to start.
Bharat Kumara, or 5 minutes. Ma, I'll take leave. Pathukringla.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I'll join in the afternoon, 1:45. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for the guidance. Dear participants, kindly fill the feedback form.
Dear participants, please join the afternoon session by 1:45 p.m. I already posted the meeting details in the Google